أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. So we continue with the explanation of Allah Ta'ala being one. That Allah Ta'ala is one and He has no partner. وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, and there's nothing like Him. There's nothing that is an analogy to Him, Jalla wa'ala. وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُهُ, and there's nothing that overwhelms Him. وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ, and there's no God other than Him. There's no one worthy of worship other than Him. This is a saying of our friends and neighbors that belong to the Christian faith. They say, Jesus loves me for who I am. And so we ask, do you worship Him or does He worship you? Otherwise, nobody's worthy of being loved for who they are except for Allah Ta'ala. That there's no ma'bud, mu'azzam, siwahu. There's no one who is worshipped and worthy of that ta'zeem and that veneration other than Him. قَدِيمٌ بِلَا ابْتِدَاءٍ دَائِمٌ بِلَا انْتِهَاءٍ. Allah Ta'ala is Qadeemun bila ibtida. Allah Ta'ala is Qadeem. What does Qadeem mean? Qadeem in the lughawi sense, in the linguistic sense in the Arabic language, means ancient or old. That's not what it means here. The word Qadeem in the terminology of the philosophers means something else. The word Qadeem in the terminology of the philosophers means primordial, meaning existent before time. Existing forever, having existed forever. He is primordially pre-existent, He has no beginning. Da'imun bila intiha, and He will exist forever, He has no end. La yafna wa la yabid. Allah Ta'ala will never perish, nor will He cease to exist. Wa la yakunu illa ma yurid. And there is nothing in existence except for that which He wishes to exist. Now, this is an occasion to talk about something which is somewhat of a prerequisite to what we talked about right now. Firstly, our Aqidah with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually quite simple, because we discussed the Aqidah and we described Aqidah as being how the mind engages with the deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Himself in His book as لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing like unto Him. Which means what? The Aqidah of the Muslims is that Allah Ta'ala is one, that He exists and that He's one, and anything else that the mind can think of, that thing is not what Allah Ta'ala is. Meaning Allah Ta'ala is unknowable through the mind. Now if there's a Christian missionary, for example, in the room, they say, got you. Islam is so impersonal, whereas Christianity offers you a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So calm down for a second, friends. First of all, it doesn't. Second of all, even the accusation that the Islam doesn't give you a relationship with Allah Ta'ala is not founded in this place. Why? Because the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the deen itself, it teaches us that the medium of communion with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala isn't the mind, it's the heart. It isn't the mind, it's the heart. Rather, the mind, its proper worship of Allah Ta'ala, its mode of sajda is what? Is submission. To know that Allah Ta'ala is greater than me, to know that Allah Ta'ala is beyond my comprehension, beyond my apprehension. Whatever I can think of, this is a proof that it's not Allah Ta'ala. This is why the tradition of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum is a saying attributed to Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, al-ajzu anil idraki idraku, that knowing that you're never going to be able to apprehend the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is itself the most perfect understanding of Allah ta'ala. Why? Because imagine your mind can imagine Allah. That means that what? At least your mind's ability to understand things in abstract, that ability to abstract is also then equivalent to Allah ta'ala, but it's not. It's not. This is one issue. So the vehicle or the medium of communion with Allah Ta'ala, the medium of communion with the Lord, it's not the mind, it's the heart. So if you want to learn about that, you won't learn about it through Aqidah, except for as a prerequisite to the main course. If you want to learn about that, that's what the ihsan is. أخبرني عن الإحسان, right? The formal study of ihsan in the history of the ummah was a science known as tasawwuf. Now people have an allergy to the word. Okay, call it whatever else you want. Call it tazkiyah, call it whatever you want to, right? You call it whatever you like. But that is the study of how a person will connect with the Lord Most High. So Allah Ta'ala says in His book, He says something, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you not seen the person who made their vain desires into a god? This is not a fiqh issue that the ulama discussed and said, yes, to make your vain desires into a god is haram. Everybody knows that. This is not a matter of discussion. This is not an Aqidah issue either. That the mutakallimun had to write, worshipping your vain desires is kufr. Everybody knows that. People do it anyway, but they don't do it as their fiqhi problem. It's not because of a problem in their practice, nor is it a problem in their mind. Because everybody, even Iblis himself, knows that Allah is Allah. He knows Allah is Allah more than you and I do. You understand what I'm saying? The Aqidah of Iblis is just fine. The heart is messed up. Why? Because it doesn't want to obey Allah Ta'ala. That's a separate issue. There's a separate study of that based in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. When people say tasawwuf, people think, oh great, this guy's going to show up with like a huge turban and like start taking donations from his disciples and dancing in the masjid and like, you know, go into a fit of ecstasy and bite the head off of a living chicken or God knows what. That's not what I'm talking about. Those things are not the deen. Right? But the corpus of the teachings of the Sunnah, they teach how the heart will engage with Allah Ta'ala. That's what I'm talking about. But that's not what I'm talking about here in this dars. That's another branch of learning. We should learn it, but that's not what the dars today is here is for. If you want that, you're barking up the wrong tree if you're looking for it in Aqidah. Rather, the Aqidah is a prerequisite that when the mind submits and admits that it cannot apprehend Allah Ta'ala, then the heart will have a open chance in order to commune with the Lord. But when the mind is trying to apprehend Allah Ta'ala, the heart will have nothing to do. It will just create chatter and confusion. So the worship of Allah Ta'ala, the mind, is to know that whatever it can think of other than Allah's existence and that He's one, anything else it can think of, that's not Allah Ta'ala. Why is that? There's a very logical reason for why that is. And this has to do with a more basic or remedial understanding that we need to talk about. I'm sorry, I drank so much caffeine today, now I'm completely dehydrated. Can I get another bottle of water? Barakallahu feekum. So the remedial question is what? Does God exist? What does Islam have to say about this question? Now, as silly as it may sound to people, there are many people, mashallah, with nice beards and hijabs and niqabs and gloves and pagris and jubbas who lead the prayers and give khutbahs, much less the people who are in more simple positions. There are many people in these positions, they themselves wonder about this question. Thank you so much, barakallahu feekum. They themselves wonder about this question. And interestingly, or I should say shockingly, this is one of the opinions of the mutakallimun, the specialist scholars and ulama of Aqidah, that it is wajib for a person to believe in the existence of Allah Ta'ala, not based on taqleed, on accepting somebody else's word for it, but based on their own conviction, personal conviction. That the iman of a person who doesn't believe in the existence of God based on their own personal conviction isn't even valid. This is a really strange thing to say for a number of reasons. First of all, people probably figured out, wow, that means that's kufr for like a lot of people. Set that aside for a second. Let's not go there, okay? Just set it aside for a second. It is a very stark thing to think about, a very bleak thing to think about. Set it aside in your mind for a second. First of all, the question is, why is it that the ulama will make a big uproar about the importance of taqleed? At least a good section of them, right? They'll make a big uproar about the importance of taqleed in fiqh. And now Mawlvi Sahib is saying that taqleed is not even valid, much less praiseworthy when it comes to your iman. And why is that? And the answer to that question, the tahqiqi answer to that question is what? Is that If you depend on another person's iman, that means that you're not bringing your own, right? If you depend on another person's fiqh, that means you're not bringing your own fiqh. That's fine, right? The day of judgment, Allah is not going to ask, why didn't you bring your own fiqh? Say, I follow the fiqh of Abu Hanifa. There's nothing wrong with that. Because it's not an objective of deen that you have to bring your own fiqh. You have to become a legal scholar. But if Allah Ta'ala asks, why didn't you bring your own iman? Why didn't you have your own faith? Why did you depend on somebody else's? It should be intuitive to everybody why it's problematic. Furthermore, the reason that there is no taqleed in iman is that there's no ijtihad in iman either. The reason that there's no taqleed in iman is that there's no ijtihad in iman either. That in fiqh, there are certain things you don't know about that the scholars don't know about. So the scholars, not the lay people, the scholars are commanded to exert their amount of learning and intelligence they have in order to figure out what the ruling of those things are. So do you have to pay zakat on cash, yes or no? This is an issue that didn't exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So the ulama, majority of them, the overwhelming majority of them, they made an analogy between like gold and silver and between cash. Now, are gold and silver and cash exactly the same thing? No, they're not. They're qualitatively different, but they're close enough that the ulama said that the zakat, just like you pay it on gold and silver, you're going to pay it on cash, right? That's what it's ijtihad. There's nothing in your iman, in the basic part of your aqidah, that's ijtihad. Allah Ta'ala told you, you have to believe it. There's no ijtihad in it, that's why there's no taqleed. Ijtihad is in those things that are not clearly spelled out for you in the kitab and the sunnah. In those matters, then you're allowed to follow qualified scholarship. Whereas those things that are spoon-fed to you literally by the kitab and sunnah in the most unequivocal and unambiguous of terms, in the most clear of terms, not confusing at all, those things you cannot then accept them saying that I follow what another person said. You have to follow them directly. You have to follow those things directly. And imagine that. Why is it if a person, Yawm al-Qiyamah, somebody says, Allah Ta'ala asks somebody, why were you Muslim? And they say, well, I was a Muslim and I believed in you, Ya Allah, and the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran because Mawlana Nabil was the Imam of our Masjid, and he said that the Quran is right, and he's a nice guy, and he always used to smile, and he was always had good akhlaq, and he's used to be good with the kids. If that was acceptable, then why is it that the person who worships the elephant god, when he comes to Allah Ta'ala and he says the same thing, why did you worship the elephant god? Well, because the priest in our temple, he was a nice guy, he always had good akhlaq, he used to take me out to Timmy's after whatever Sunday elephant school, and he used to give a lot of money to charity, and he was just a good guy. If that person gives the exact same answer and they're going to the hellfire, and then the Muslim kid gives the exact same answer and they're going to Jannah, this is not insaf. There's no fairness, nor is there any logic or reason to this. Rather, the madhab of the Asha'ira is that there's no taqleed in the iman billahi tabarak wa ta'ala. You have to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on your own conviction, and that conviction is not based on the Quran, and it's not based on the hadith. It's based on rationality. It's based on what? It's based on rationality. It's based on what? It's based on rationality. This idea that rationality is somehow at loggerheads or at odds with wahi, with revelation, or with religious belief, this is an issue that the Christians and the Jews have. Why? Because they believe in a universe that's like 5,000 some odd years old. And we know the universe is much older than that. We literally have written history that's older than 5,000 some odd years. Forget about carbon dating and all these other things, right? Why is it that it's at loggerheads for them? Because the Nasara, they believe in God, Allah being three gods and being one at the same time. And if you were to write 1 = 3 in any math class, you would be failed from kindergarten, much less from any class an adult would take. And when they're confronted with this issue, they say, well, it's a holy mystery. We just accept it as a mystery, as a divine mystery, that at some basic level, all the rules of rationality and logic break down. This is not an aqidah of the Muslims. Rather, the Quran again and again exhorts the Muslim to use their brain, to use aql and to use logic. Allah Ta'ala, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Are you not people of rational thought? We send it down as an Arabic Quran so that you may be people of rational understanding. The exhortation to rationality in the Quran is something that happens again and again and again. And in fact, the sifa, the trait of the people of the hellfire is that what? They're the people who check out, the rational part of their brain checks out. And they don't attempt to subject their thought processes to it. And so Allah Ta'ala does exist, and there is a proof for Allah Ta'ala's existence. According to the madhab of tahqiq, in my opinion, there's a difference of opinion amongst the mutakallimun, but in my humble opinion, this is the strongest opinion of the ulama, is that what? That the person who doesn't have rational conviction, they're not convinced that Allah Ta'ala is necessarily existent, that person, the rest of their iman is not even valid. Now, I'm not making takfir of anyone. Don't go down that route, okay? But just hear me out. At least it's important, right? So if you don't know what the rational proof of Allah's existence is, instead of getting upset and angry and throwing something at me, sharpening your sword and taking the safety off of your pistol. I guess in Canada you guys don't have guns here, so I don't know, bows and arrows or whatever ajib way you guys kill each other. But before you do that, just listen to the proof. It's not all that complicated. You'll learn it. It will be good. It will be like, the house, all this while the lights were off. If the lights turn on and the furnace starts burning and it becomes hot inside in the cold of the winter, what will that harm you? You'll have come to this. This is why I said this is literally the most important segment of the entire module of the entire teaching of the book. Once the light turns on, you'll see it will benefit you. Go share this information with other people as well. On the flip side, because we turned our back on our scholastic tradition and we think that Islam is going to be revived when everyone becomes a doctor and has a lot of money, we don't give time and importance to these things anymore, so people forgot them. So what is the rational proof of Allah Ta'ala's existence? It's summarized as what? As حاجة كل مخلوق للصانع. حاجة كل مخلوق للصانع. Which is the necessity of every created thing for someone to have made it. Or it can be restated in a different way. The necessity of everything in the world of causes and effects to have a cause. Now, there are different types of knowledge, right? The philosophers, they graded knowledge into different types. So the first type of knowledge that the manatiqa and falasifa talk about, the logicians and the philosophers talk about, is what we refer to as al-ilm al-adi. Al-ilm al-adi. Adi means that thing which is, adi, what does adi mean? Adi means like normal, right? Thing that like it's a habit, that thing that happens out of custom or normally happens, right? What's adi, right? If I throw this up in the air, it will come down. It's adi, it will land every single time you do that. Everyone is habituated to expect the thing to land, right? That's normal. It's funny, I studied in Mauritania. Mauritania is a funny, mashallah, Allah Ta'ala protect every one of the Muslim lands and every land that the Muslims live in, and Allah Ta'ala protect his creation from harm. Mauritanians have a funny custom, Bedouins, they're very strange custom, which is that whatever happens to you, something crazy could happen to you. You'd be like, oh my God, a car hit my house and then it set on fire, burned my entire house down. In fact, it burned the entire neighborhood down, and then a meteor hit it, And you can say the most crazy thing in the world, there's adi. It's normal. Anyhow. Anyone here been to Mauritania before? Anyway, forget about it then. I apologize. That was a little self-indulgent moment. So al-ilm al-adi is what? That thing that happens regularly, right? That you observe it again and again. It's empirical knowledge, right? What is science? Science all has to do with what? You make a hypothesis and then you test out a hypothesis you observe. Is that what happens or is that not what happens, right? So what are the means of this empirical observation? The senses, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, hearing. What else? Counting, things that are self-evident. All of these things, they fall under the ambit of the ilm al-ada, something that's empirically verifiable by and large. There's other branches of it like self-evident, like this is a question, how do you know that you exist? Well, it's self-evident. you not only do not need recourse to an explanation for it, but even that explanation itself will break down at some point or another. It's just, I'm aware of my own existence, and if my own self-awareness is an illusion, then nothing exists. So we're gonna exclude that possibility. So ilm al-adi is those things that are intuitive, self-evident, sensory knowledge, etc., counting, things like that don't require explanation or rational verification. And so that's what science is, amongst other things. It's a branch of learning. So when someone says, what's the proof of Allah Ta'ala existing? How is this question asked in like a university? Your professor will say, well, you can't prove God exists. And what do you mean? Can you show him to me? No. Can I hear him? Can I touch him? Can I smell him? Can I taste him? No. Therefore, ... he doesn't exist. And this doesn't negate, it's a fact, these things are all facts. They don't negate the proof of Allah's existence, they negate an empirical proof of Allah's existence. Right? That there's no sensory proof of Allah's existence. In fact, I'll go one step further. I'll say Islam itself negates the empirical proof of God's existence. Why? Because Allah Ta'ala himself says, لا تدرك الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار, that the vision will not see him even though he sees all the visions. And here the mention of the basar is, the mention of vision is not because you'll be able to smell him. Jalla wa ala. Why is it mentioned the basar? Why is it mentioned the vision? Because the basar is the most powerful of the human senses, and it's a sense that we're most dependent on. So the idea is what? That if you cannot see him, then you can't understand him in any other way as well. The Quran itself negates an empirical proof for the existence of God. However, there is a rational proof for the existence of God. Okay, so the first is that ilm al-adi, which is like empirical and self-evident types of knowledge, right? The second type of knowledge is what? Al-ilm al-aqli, rational knowledge. So rationality is what? Rationality is those sets of things that all sane people from all walks of life, regardless of what country they're from, what language they speak, what color their skin is, if they're rich, if they're poor, if they're healthy, if they're sick, the only common sifa or attribute between all the people who agree on these things is what? That they're sane. You know, if the person is not like, you know, running around screaming about, you know, like aliens everywhere, left or right, they're obviously, you know, they're playing with the full deck of cards. All the people who are sane, there's a certain set of things that they all agree upon, even though they disagree upon so many things. What are those things? Simple principles, like for example, the part of something cannot be greater than the whole of that thing. Right? This is a rational principle. So when somebody asked me once that, why don't you believe Jesus is God? I said, well, look, do you believe God created everything? He goes, yeah. I said, well, if God created everything and the earth is part of everything and Jesus was part of the earth, alayhi salam, then how could he be God? It's like saying that a carpenter built a table and he's also part of the table. It doesn't, rationally it breaks down. Why? Because the part cannot be greater than the whole. This is a rational precept. All sane people will accept this. And this is why the Nasara, they say, well, our Aqidah at some basic level, logic breaks down and it's just based on a sacred mystery. Whereas that's not what as Muslims, that's not what our relationship with our creed ever was. In fact, this is one of the amdah of the Prophet ﷺ in the Qasida Burda. Busiri rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, لَمْ يَمْتَحِنَّا بِمَا لَا تَعْيَ الْعُقُولُ بِهِ حِرْصًا عَلَيْنَا فَلَمْ نَرْتَبْ وَلَمْ نَهِيمِ. That Rasulullah ﷺ, he never tested us by forcing us to believe something that the intellect or that our understanding of logic wouldn't be able to apprehend. out of his hirs, out of his avidness for the protection of our iman, and therefore we never doubted, nor did we ever believe in vain thoughts, and thoughts that are unchained to any semblance of reality. This is something that the Muslims, they celebrated. It's really interesting. I don't know if you guys remember. You remember the previous Pope, Cardinal Ratzinger? What was his name? What was his regnal title? Benedict, right? So what did he say? One of the first things that he said, and this is, again, this is not anti-Catholic vective. We have Christian friends and neighbors. We respect them and get along with them. We disagree with them about Aqidah. This is not a secret, right? But we get along with them and things like that. But it's no secret that we don't agree with their Aqidah. Benedict was Ratzinger, Cardinal Ratzinger was the expert and the foremost authority on Aqidah amongst the Catholics. Okay, so when he first became Pope, he said something. He knew it was wrong. He knew he was being disingenuous when he said it. He said that Christianity is based on reason and Islam is antagonistic to reason. It's very interesting. I remember I was in madrasa in those days when I read that in the newspaper in Pakistan. And in my spare time, I was reading a novel. There's a novel, Don Quixote. It's like one of the first novels that written in Western Europe. It was it's a Spanish novel written about an old man who's senile, and he imagines that he's a knight, and he goes around doing silly things, and then there's stories within the story that are woven into the story. Cervantes, right? So Cervantes writes this novel, and it's written at a time when the Catholic Church is very powerful and ascendant in Spain. And so the novel Don Quixote, actually, if you buy a copy of it, the first page is actually a fatwa by the Catholic Church saying that there's nothing in this book that goes against the teachings of the Catholic Church. It's actually vetted by priests and stamped that it's in accordance to the teachings of the Catholic Church. So there's a sub-story within the Don Quixote in which two friends, they're having conversations. So one friend says to the other that my wife, she loves me and we're really happy, but I don't know, is she really a good wife or not? Will she be loyal through thick and thin? I want to test her, to see if she's really as good as I think she is, so that I can know whether she is or not. And so his friend's like, look, this is a dumb idea. Why? Because if you test her and she fails the test, you're going to make yourself miserable, and you're going to be the cause of the misery. Like if you didn't test her, you would have still been happy. But you caused your own misery. And if you test her and she passes, then you don't gain anything out of that. And so what does the first friend say to the second friend who says this thing to him? He says, you're talking all this logic and all of this sense. This is the speech of the Moors. We're Christians, we don't believe in that. Right? Their entire Aqidah is actually founded on irrationality, and they euphemistically say that it's based on a holy mystery. Right? So at any rate, what is rationality? Rationality is certain very common precepts. For example, anyone's taken like geometry or whatever, or knows how to write a basic mathematical or logical proof or syllogism, you know that there are certain logical precepts that you can use to take information to find out information that you don't know without having to empirically measure it out. So for example, if you have three objects, A, B, and C, and you have scale pans, and you put object A in one scale pan and B in this other scale pan, and they balance out. And then you take object B in one scale pan and C in the other one, and they balance out. What is the relationship between A and C if you put them in the scale pans? They'll balance, right? That's a possibility. It's not only a possibility, it's necessary. There's no other possible outcome. Either you screwed up your initial assessment, or if your initial assessment is correct, A and C have to be equal. There's no other possibility. There's no other possibility. And so this is also a rational precept. There are a number of rational precepts like that. And so there is a rational proof for the existence of Allah Ta'ala. And what is that? That's what we mentioned, the hajatu kulli makhluqi lis-sani'i, that there is no nadhir, there is no precedent, anything in the world of causes and effects that something exists without something causing it to exist. So if I say Salman bhai, go turn around, look in the back. Look at the back, go ahead. And I throw this bottle at him and it hits him in the back of the head. And he's like, why do you do that? And I'm like, I didn't do it, it just happened itself. I didn't do it, it just happened itself. That would be irrational. Why? Because nothing happens itself. So in the Middle Ages, what they refer to in Western society is the Dark Ages. In the Dark Ages, they used to believe in something called spontaneous generation, which means that life spontaneously appears. So if you took like a damp rag and threw it in a dark cellar, wrap rancid meat in it and throw it in a dark cellar, it will automatically, spontaneously turn into a rat. Why did they believe this? Because whenever you did it, always rats would appear and no one knew where they came from. So at some point, after believing this for some time, this is mentioned in biology books. Why is it mentioned in biology books? So as to laugh at how stupid people used to be. Although they weren't as stupid as people think they are, but this thing was itself patently, it was not really, admittedly it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so what happened is that, someone's like, look, why don't we do this experiment where we wrap up the rancid meat and put it in a damp rag in a dark cellar, but just kind of like watch it. Don't ever let it out of your eyes. What will you notice? It's not the meat that spontaneously turns into the rat, rather the rat comes from the outside and it eats it, right? So this is mentioned in the books of biology, not because it gives you any insight about biology, but as a way of laughing at how stupid those people were, essentially. Okay? Now tell me something, what's more stupid? To believe that a piece of rancid meat in a damp rag in a dark cellar can turn into a rat, or to believe that nothing can turn into everything? By rational analogy, a piece of rancid meat in a damp rag in a dark cellar is greater than nothing. And a rat is lesser than everything. So if it's dumb to believe that the rancid meat in a damp rag in a dark cellar can turn into a rat, it's a priori, bit-tariq al-awla, it's a priori analogy, rational analogy, that the belief that nothing can turn into everything is even dumber. It's even more illogical, irrational, and it's even more ridiculous of a belief. And so that's what we say. We say that what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created everything from nothing. And someone might say, well then, who created Allah? By your description. We say no. Everything within the realm of causes and effects requires some cause to make it happen. Whereas Allah ta'ala, by necessity, His existence transcends the realm of causes and effects. He created time, He created space, He created causality, all of these things. The buck has to stop somewhere. He created all of these things. So what you see is amongst the old school atheist philosophers who are philosophically far more well trained than the new school ones are. You see amongst those people who don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have to answer this question, where did everything come from then? And the way they would answer that question was by proposing a cosmology or a view of the universe that is cyclical in nature. That somehow things just go in cycles of death and rebirth, destruction and creation. They just go in cycles again and again and again, and the material world always existed, and it just goes through these cycles again and again just because that's the way stuff is, right? So this type of, because that's the way stuff is, explanation, this is known in logic as infinite regress. We refer to it in the mantiqi terminology of the Arabic language as a dawr al-musalsal. Infinite regress is a type of logical fallacy. For example, they say that if you ask them what is a statue, and they say that a statue is what sits on a pedestal, and they ask what's the pedestal, and you say, well, the pedestal is the thing that the statue sits on, they've defined neither statue nor pedestal. Because it's cyclically referent. There's no actual thing that you're referring back to. Rather, these words just go in a circle and nothing is defined at all. So it's essentially like the verbal equivalent of dividing by zero. But this is what they say. They say, well, no, this is just the way it is. Right? So you say that Allah Ta'ala always existed, we say the material world always existed. You say that Allah is necessarily existent, we say that the material world is necessarily existent. You say that Allah will always exist, we say the material world always exists. And we say, look, the universe is not haphazard. There's order in it. It's not chaotic. There's order in it. There's design in it. There is regularity in it. Those things are not the product of randomness. Rather, they're the product of intentionality. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're the product of intentionality. Even the nature of this universe is what they call entropy. This is one of the laws of thermodynamics, that all systems will spontaneously move toward decay. Even the spontaneous decay of this universe, it all happens by order. It's not just like stuff randomly, spontaneously combusting here and there. Even the way matter and energy decay, it's in a predictable fashion. There's things even on the quantum level that seem like they're random. They're not random at all, in fact. There's a method, there's a logic to it. Even those things that seem random, their seeming randomness is explained by mathematics and by physics. It's everything, there's an order to all of it. Some of it we don't understand, but we notice that there's an order to all of it. It's not that one day you see that the gravity is going to pull things toward the earth, and then the other day the gravity is shooting things outward. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Even if it did work that way, there would be a set of circumstances in which that would happen, and another set of circumstances in which that would not happen. And so all of these things, they point toward a type of intentionality and a type of order, which is not the sifa or the attribute of chaos or randomness, but it is the attribute of design, and the attribute of intention and intentionality, the attribute of desire, the attribute of something that's alive, someone that's alive. However, look at what every other religion thinks of as God. Right? So the Yahud, they say that, the corrupted copy of the Torah that they keep with them, they put all sorts of strange stories in it. So for example, what does the word Israel mean? Israel means what? That he wrestled with God. This is a title of Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, right? Our ulama say, no, they misunderstood and they misappropriated that name. The real meaning is to struggle in the path of Allah Ta'ala, but they say no, it means he wrestled with Allah, and so they bring a story in the corrupted copy of the Torah that which is ridiculous, that God came to the universe in the form of a man. Now the Jews, what? They also believe like the Christians believe, right? That God came to the universe in the form of a man, and he had a wrestling match with Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam. And what even makes even less sense than that is that Sayyidina Yaqub won the wrestling match. Which means what? Should we worship Allah then, or should we worship Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam? It makes no sense whatsoever. This is their conception of Allah. And then look at the Nasara, the Christians, what their conception of Allah, that he came to this world as a man. Look at the Hindus, what their conception of God is. The Buddhists that share the Vedic cosmology, the Indic cosmology of like birth and death and rebirth and like a cyclical universe, they themselves, because of the philosophically robust nature of their belief, they actually dispose with the idea of Allah Ta'ala altogether. They don't even, Buddhism, whether God exists or doesn't exist, is like irrelevant to Buddhism. Why? Because their idea of God is this thing that's trapped within time and space. It's like a person, but like Marvel X-Men superhero. Maybe he's like a mutant person who can fly and shoot stuff and get bigger and smaller and control magnetic fields and God knows what other nonsense, right? That's not worthy of worship, and that's not Allah, and it doesn't solve the answer. It doesn't answer the question of where did everything come from. So we say that Allah Ta'ala is the one from which this time and space, from which the realm of causes and effects, it comes from. He transcends, he's beyond the realm of causes and effects. He's not bound by time, he's not bound by space. This is what the meaning of Laysa kamithlihi shay is. Allah Ta'ala himself describes himself in his book as what? There's nothing like unto him. The mind will not be able to understand him. Why? Not because we're saying it's a holy mystery. Rather, as a rational, there's a logical conclusion. The thing that's bound in time and space is not going to be able to understand that being that's unbound by time and space. We have no reference to understand what that transcendence is like. All we can say is everything we know is limited, everything about him is unlimited. Whatever we know if we can know it, we know it's a proof that it's not him, Jalla wa ala. There must be a being like that from which all of these things originate. There's no other way that these things could originate other than that. This is what the hajatu kulli makhluqin lis-sani'i, the need for every created thing for a fashioner, or the need for everything within the world of causes and effects to have a cause in order to make them exist. And so someone says, well, what made Allah exist? Causality doesn't exist when time doesn't exist. Allah Ta'ala created time. For the math junkies and math geeks amongst you, right? Let's make a graph. Where's Maulana Nabil and his whiteboard, man? Let's make a graph. Okay, visualize, my friends and relatives. Visualize. There's a graph. Time, when it's created, what does t equal? The moment time is created. 0. Now tell me something. What was Allah Ta'ala doing 5 minutes before t equals 0? Anyone? You're smart people, go ahead, tell me. Right? Time didn't exist. This question is a null question. If the instant Allah Ta'ala created time is t equals 0, to ask what's happening before that, that question makes no sense at all. Why? Because time is not created. Can something exist before it's created? Absolutely not. Time and space, both of them, they are something, a cage Allah Ta'ala created, and all of us exist within that cage. He's not bound by that cage. If we try to bring Allah Ta'ala into that cage, what have we done? We've made him resemble his creation. And once we've done that, then the question remains unanswered, where did all of this come from? If we accept the fact that Allah Ta'ala is from beyond that cage, you know, people ask, why is it that God is referred to as He in the Quran? Right? Look, that's a grammatical issue. Because the Arabic has grammatical gender. What we can tell you for sure is that that grammatical gender has nothing to do with biological gender. If somebody believes Allah has biological gender, that person has disbelieved in Allah. Why? Because if you drag him into the cage of time and space, Jalla wa ala, this leaves that question unanswered. Where did all this come from? The answer to that question in abstract is what? It's Allah. You know He exists, you know He's one. Everything else about Him you cannot know. But you know, since we exist, we have to have come from somewhere. And you cannot keep kicking the can down the road. It has to, at some point or another, come to some sort of solution. At some point or another, time begins. At some point or another, space begins. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not contained in any of them. Now, what is Tahawi? Coming back to our book, you know, before you say this guy's kind of going off on his own tangent. What does it mean Allah Ta'ala says, Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala says about Allah Ta'ala, قَدِيمٌ بِلَا ابْتِدَاءٍ دَائِمٌ بِلَا انْتِهَاءٍ, that Allah Ta'ala existed before, forever, before, and He will exist always. It means what? His existence transcends time and space. You and I are caught in this realm of three dimensions, and in this sequentiality of time. This is a cage Allah Ta'ala made. Allah Ta'ala is not bound by it. Allah was as He is right now, as He will ever be. Change doesn't affect Him. This is one of the meanings, by the way, of Allahu Samad, right? Sumud means what? One of the meanings of sumud in the Arabic language is for a city that's under siege to outlast a siege. Meaning time will not batter it or weather it down. That's one of the meanings of sumud. Allah is a samad. Time doesn't change Him. He is who He always was. We exist in time, we experience things in time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, time doesn't affect Him. So this idea of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is elucidated by Tahawi and by the Quran and by the Sunnah and by the ulama and fuqaha of the millah of Islam. And Tahawi continues, he says, La tabluhu al-awhamu wa la tudrikuhu al-afhamu wa la yushbihuhu al-anam. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is what? He is the one that, wahm. What does the word wahm mean? Wahm means a spurious and idle and completely unchained thought. Right? So for example, two kids are arguing with each other, right? My dad can beat up your dad. No, my dad can beat up your dad. Well, my dad can punch your dad in the face and break his face. Well, my dad can pick up a car and throw it at your car. Well, my dad can pick up a whole house and smash your dad with it. Well, my dad can pick up a black hole and like throw like 5 of them at your... What is it? They're unchained, no semblance to reality. Just people are just yapping on about something that has no connection with reality. That's what a wahm is. So Tahawi says that there's no wahm that's so outlandish that it will one day allow a person to come to anywhere near what the reality of Allah is. And then on the flip side, right, وَلَا تُدْرِكُهُ الْأَفْهَامُ, that there's no person of knowledge that their knowledge is going to allow them to ever understand Allah. So there's a lot of, for example, you know, what's Avogadro's number? How many atoms are there in a mole of something? Anyone? Yeah, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. That's a big number. We don't have like a word for that number in language. Rather, you have to use scientific notation in order to describe that number. It's a really big number. And so scientific notation, obviously illiterate person, farmer is not going to know what that is, right? It's your fahm that allows you to, it's your understanding that allows you to transact in such a large number. So Tahawi is saying, just like there's no wahm that will let you reach what the reality of Allah is, there's also no fahm, no understanding that will ever allow you to reach what the reality of Allah Ta'ala is. Why? لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. We have no way of understanding what does existence mean outside of time, what does existence mean outside of space, because of our being bound up in it. It's something, we're limited and that's infinite. There's no way we're going to be able to understand how that could be, what it means, etc. And so just like Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala negates time for Allah ta'ala, that Allah is not caged within time, he also will negate space later on, that Allah ta'ala is also not caged within space. And this is something really interesting about the Arabic language. Anyone taken Arabic before? Anyone? Someone? Yeah, right? So like in Arabic, the dharf for makan and for zaman is what? It's the same, right? The part of speech that describes the time something happens and the place that something happens is the same. Which is like, you know, a really interesting, an interesting like double example of that is what? When you're going to Hajj or Umrah, right? A lot of hajis and hajjat, mashallah, in this gathering. When you're going for Hajj, what is the name of the boundary where you have to have ihram before crossing? The miqat, right? What's the jither? What's the 3-letter root word that miqat is based on? Waqt, which means time. Even though the miqat is a spatial boundary, not a temporal boundary. It's a temporal boundary as well when it comes to Hajj at least. It's a spatial boundary. But the idea is what? Is that in Arabic, there is a sort of analogy between time and space, which if you think about it is kind of Star Trek-y. But you know, this is the tongue of the ancients. This is the tongue of the ancient ones. This is the tongue of Ad and Thamud at some point. This is the tongue of the Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam in Jannah. That's why this subtlety is there in it. This is our belief. And if a person doesn't want to believe it, then say, yeah, I guess those people were just kind of deep that way. Then if you don't have an explanation for it, that's fine. But you have to admit that's kind of deep, mashallah. So the idea is that at least, even linguistically, you should be able to intuit that if he negates temporality for Allah Ta'ala, he will also negate, he also is in that negating spatiality. And someone might say, well, you're just making that up, Mawli Saab. He'll actually explicitly do it later on in the book, inshallah. But for now, he just negates the temporality. Why? Because it has to do with causation. That Allah Ta'ala is not trapped within the realm of causation. Rather, He transcends it. Causation starts with Him, but it doesn't include Him. He starts the causation doesn't affect Him. And this is one really interesting thing about Islam. Islam is the only deen that understands Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that makes Him supreme over all other things, even over abstraction, over time, space, abstract concepts, philosophies, justice, all of these things. Allah Ta'ala is above all of them. Right? What do the Christians say? They say God is just, and because He's just, He has to punish the sinners, and because He has to punish the sinners, He came back into this world in order to take the punishment on Himself on behalf of the sinners so that He could forgive everybody else. So, hold on a second. Why does Allah have to do anything except for whatever He wants to do? First of all. Second of all, if he's just, then how is punishing someone who's innocent gonna increase the amount of justice in the world? It's just another list of injustices, it's just another injustice in the list of injustices. Nobody said kufr is supposed to make sense. Rather, one violation of the sovereignty of Allah Ta'ala will lead to a shattering tree with branches shattering through existence, breaking apart the logic and the reason in existence. Without the tawheed of Allah Ta'ala and without the tanzih, the transcendence of Allah Ta'ala over all things, nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense at all. And so, we say that Allah Ta'ala la tushbihu al-anam, nothing in the creation resembles Him. Nothing in the creation can resemble Him. This is something that we know based on fahm. It's not a holy mystery. Rather, it's a holy understanding. It's not a holy mystery, it's a holy understanding. It's a holy logic that through it anything else makes sense. Without it, nothing else can make sense. Hayyun la yamutu qayyumun la yanamu. Allah Ta'ala is ever living and He never dies. Allah Ta'ala is the one through whom everything exists and subsists, and He never rests. Meaning nothing can exist without Him. So we say that Allah Ta'ala exists and we exist. But the difference between His existence and our existence is what? His existence is al-qa'im bil-dhat. His existence is essential. Our existence is an extension of His existence. We have no existence of our own. His existence is His own. Our existence is something that's essential. Now tell me something, if Allah Ta'ala is not caged within time, what does it mean in the book of Allah Ta'ala when Allah Ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ? That indeed the affair of Allah Ta'ala is nothing except for if He wishes something to be, He says to it, be, and it is. That command of kun, that command of be, when did it happen? In the past? Is it happening now, or is it happening in the future? Which one is it? If Allah Ta'ala is not caged by time, it means all of the above. And should in any instant, any frame of our experience, should that commandment of kun be withdrawn, we have no ability to exist on our own. We have no choice except for to perish. And so this is what we mean when Allah say Allah is qayyum. Qayyum means what? Everything, its sustenance and its existence is through Him. He is actively doing it. If it wasn't for Him actively doing it, nothing will exist. And that's why qayyumun la yanam, right? Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm. Everything has to exist through Him. This is a proof that He doesn't slumber and He doesn't sleep. Because if Allah Ta'ala were to quote unquote rest on the seventh day or anything of that nature, then what would happen? No one else would be around to experience what does that seventh day, does it even exist or not? And this is one of the really interesting things, so many interesting things in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that he says that the Israfil, the angel will blow on the trumpet, everything will cease to exist. And then for some amount of time known in the knowledge of Allah Ta'ala, only His dhat will be there. Which is what? It's a demonstration of Allah being Allah and us being nothing in front of Him. We don't say that we're nothing as in we don't exist. We do exist, but it's only at His whim. We acknowledge our existence as a way of acknowledging His commandment. Otherwise, if it wasn't for that, our existence is when compared to His, it's closer to non-existence. This is not something abstract. This is based on deep understanding of the Kitab and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so that's why the fact that we experience existing, this is a proof that Allah Ta'ala slumber and tiredness don't overtake Him. Khaliqun bila hajatin, raziqun bila mu'na. These are the things, by the way, the reason that we should study Aqidah. And not because so you can say XYZ group is kafir and we're gonna give a ban about how horrible they are in the Jummah and whatever. That's not the primary reason for Aqidah. Fine, if someone believes something that's nonsense, someone will say, oh yeah, I believe that some guy in Punjab is like a Nabi after the Prophet ﷺ. We'll say, yes, this is wrong. This is the proof from the Quran, this is proof from the Sunnah, why it's incompatible with Islam, and that's why a person who believes this cannot be a Muslim. That's a branch of the study of Aqidah will teach you those things. However, that's not the most important benefit of the Aqidah. The most important benefit of Aqidah is what? So you know what your deen is, rather than knowing what somebody else's deen shouldn't be. So Allah Ta'ala, He says what? He's a khaliqun bila haja. Allah created the creation, He needed nothing from it. Right? In logic, right? In fiqh, there's like 5 hukums or 7 hukums. Something can either be obligation or recommended or permissible or disliked or impermissible, right? In the law of rationality, there's only 3 ahkam. Something either is necessary, something is impossible, or something is possible. So Allah's existence is what? It's necessary. The fact that any existence exists is a fact that there has to be some existence that is necessarily there, and that's the existence of Allah. Our existence is what? It's possible. If Allah wished to create us for whatever hikmah is there with Him, so He created us. If He didn't create us, there would be nothing that would break down in the universe. You understand what I'm saying? Allah is khaliqun bila haja. He created the creation and He has no need for it. Raziqun bila mu'na. Allah Ta'ala gives a rizq. Allah Ta'ala gives provision to all of His creation, and He doesn't have to save up for it. He doesn't have to store things for it or gather things for it. Like for example, you want to buy a house, right? You want to buy a house in Toronto. Good luck. You have to have what, $1 million, $2 million, something like that, right? You save the money. Or if you get some sort of halal Islamic mortgage or whatever. I realize it's somewhat of a sort of sensitive topic in the community over here, but you know, then you're buying it on someone else's savings, or at least supposedly so, right? You have to save for it to get the money to plunk the cash down. Allah Ta'ala doesn't need to do any of that. He creates everything from nothing. Why is this important? Do you realize we live amongst the people who don't believe that? Some of them are Muslims, at least outwardly as well. Those are very scary people. Why? Because imagine if there's only a limited number of breaths in the air and only a limited number of sips of water and only a limited amount of food production and only a limited amount of land and only a limited amount of money. If all the provision is limited, then what? A day will necessarily come where those things will diminish and they'll run out. And that day, all of us will become enemies with one another. That day there's going to be a fight. There are people who their aqidah is what? That all these things are limited, and that day of fight is inevitable, and they've been preparing for it. They've been preparing for how they're gonna kill you and your family and take that stuff from you on that day. You guys were praying and fasting and, you know, like going to tarawih and all these other things. They're still planning right now. How are they gonna jack your stuff that day when all these things run out? Is that the way a Muslim thinks? No. But some of us, mashallah, didn't study aqidah, and some of us haven't imbibed this aqidah inside of our hearts, so we think that way. So what is it? There's someone who's saying we're going to raise money for the orphans in Yemen. Right? There's a horrible war going on over there. The children are dying of cholera, malnutrition, famine on a hitherto unimaginable scale in that land. And so what do the Masjid know? We have to pay off the new building. Right? Isn't it the Aqidah of the Ahlus Sunnah Wal Jamah? Allah Ta'ala takes care of all of them and gives the rizq to all of them separately. Or is that a joke that grandmothers, or old wives' tale that grandmothers tell their children in order to put them to sleep, and we live in the real world? Are you also going to go home and start sharpening your knives and preparing for the day that you fight with other people for something to eat? And then afterward grow a beard and pray 5 times a day in the masjid, outwardly bringing the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and inside of your heart bringing the same filth that the kufr of a kafir has inside of his heart. These are real issues, by the way. This is why the Muslim world is like fractured and people are fighting and killing each other, is because this fasid aqidah has replaced what the aqidah of our forefathers was. The Sahaba radiallahu anhu, why did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forgive his enemies on the day of the Fath? Why did he forgive his enemies? Why? Because they believe that all this rizq, it comes from Allah Ta'ala. He gives, if He wants to, He'll feed you, He'll feed your enemies, He'll feed like people and things that you didn't know. Allah Ta'ala sustains everyone and everything. You think something is going to run out, something else comes. Imagine, could anybody imagine that the Arabian Peninsula could support the amount of wealth and opulence and the number of residents that it supports right now? You see how many people come to Hajj. Every hotel seems like some sort of 5-star hotel. Every one of them, people are drinking like apple juice out of wine glasses, and like, you know, there's grapes and watermelons being consumed and thrown away and wasted by tons, and you know, there's roasts being cut, and where does all of this come from? It's all the rizq of Allah Ta'ala. Someone says, well, you know, we brought it from this place, from that place. Well, how did you bring it? How come like Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab weren't able to bring it? Why? Because Allah Ta'ala didn't write it as provision for them. When this oil runs out, something else would come, and if Allah Ta'ala wishes to, He'll constrict it as well. The choice is in His hands. It's not anything except for that. This is an aqidah that we have, and it makes us good people. It makes us pleasant people. In this world, in the Day of Judgment, it will make us people that are loved by Allah Ta'ala rather than hated by Allah Ta'ala. This is a very essential aqidah of ours. We ignore it, and we downplay it, and we don't talk about it, we don't remind each other about it, and it's to our own detriment. And then when we think about aqidah, we think about someone's going to get into some sort of sectarian fight and cause like whatever, and people will call each other kafir, so we don't want that in the masjid. That's not what the study of aqidah is. This is the study of aqidah. This is the main objective and the benefit of the study of aqidah. Mumitun bila makhafa, ba'ithun bila mashaqqa. Allah Ta'ala is the one who gives death, and He doesn't fear retribution from anybody thereafter. No one's going to get revenge from Him. Ba'ithun bila mashaqqa, and Allah Ta'ala will raise the dead and give them life again, and it's not difficult for Him, right? He says in his book, he says, وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ. This is one of the really interesting things, the rational proofs of the Quran. So the Quran, it's very interesting. The Quran is the book of Allah Ta'ala. We say Allah exists and that He's one. And these are rational conclusions. You don't need wahy in order to understand them. And that we say that Allah Ta'ala is the one who created with intentionality. Meaning what? If you have intention, I have intention. You're alive, I'm alive. You have a desire and a plan and logic through which you work, and I have that as well. Why is it that we can have it and the one who created it in us cannot have it? So you see this, a lot of materialist, like atheist type scientists and things like that, they'll be like, well, I believe in a God, but like a God of the rules of math and physics, not like a personal God that answers your prayers. Why not? Or do you believe that the carpenter makes the table, and the table knows more about the carpenter than the carpenter knows about the table? This is irrational. I want you to understand, this is irrational. Either you say that all intelligence in this universe is an illusion. There's chemical processes happening in our brain right now that make the illusion of our own sentience and our own wisdom and our own knowledge, intentionality, etc., self-awareness, and it's all an illusion. If it's an illusion, then what's wrong with me punching in your face and taking your wallet? It shouldn't be immoral. Why? Because even morality and immorality is an illusion. By the way, there are people who believe these types of things, and that's why they do, in slightly more sophisticated ways, punch people in their face and take their wallets. But at any rate, the idea is that this is intuitive to a human being that this is not the case. That the one who created life is more alive than the one whose life was created. The one who created intelligence is more intelligent than the one whose intelligence was created. Allah Ta'ala doesn't, the one who created sanity, His sanity is more rational than the sanity of the one whose sanity is created. Allah Ta'ala created the universe for a reason. That reason He's going to communicate it to His creation. Now tell me something, if Allah Ta'ala wanted to communicate His intention to us, how would He do it? Would He send an email? Why not? Why you laugh at that? Why not? He sent us an email saying, okay, I want you to pray 5 times a day and fast in Ramadan and try to go to Tarawih if you don't have finals that week, right? Why wouldn't He send an email? What would the problem be with that? There's like stuff here, like Tarawih, what is that, right? What am I supposed to, Okay, fine. Allah Ta'ala made a tech support line. You can call and you'll get some support. Okay, this is what Tarawih is, 20 rak'ahs, this, that, the other thing. I still don't get it. Like, how is the ruku supposed to be? How is the sajda supposed to be? I don't get it. Okay, what? Have a YouTube channel so you can see how it's supposed to be? Okay, that's fine. I kind of get that now. But like, how should I have khushu in the prayer? How do I have humility in the prayer? Eventually you have to see it from somebody, right? Because a human being learns from a human being. This actually objection is the same objection that the mushrikeen of Quraysh brought. They said, you say you're the messenger of Allah. Why didn't Allah just send an angel? It would have been easier for all of us. Allah Ta'ala himself says in his book, he doesn't say, shut up, I'm Allah, you have to listen to me. Although if he said that, that would also be valid. What does he say? He gives a rational rebuttal. He says that if we were to send an angel, we would have sent the angel in human form, and he would have worn human clothes as well. Meaning what? If the angel comes in some sort of like abstract, like transcendent light form, how are you going to understand what he's saying? Okay, it has to speak human language, it has to have a human body, etc., etc. Even then, if the angel came, you'd be like, of course he's going to say all this wonderful spiritual stuff. He's an angel. He doesn't have to eat and sleep and go to the bathroom. How am I supposed to relate to him? So what's the ideal form of sending the message? Basharun mithlukum. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. Say, Ya Muhammad alayka salatu wasalam, that indeed I am nothing but a human being like you. The difference is, yuha ilayya annama ilahukum ilahun wahid. That the revelation has come to me about your Lord being one God, meaning not just the tawheed of Allah, but the entire deen. The tawheed is the most important part of it. And in fact, as amazing as it would have been if an angel walked into the room right now and like, whoa, and like floating in the air and shooting light at people, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. What's more amazing than that? Because angel, that's what an angel does. That's actually quite normal, all right? What's more amazing? And a human being will live his life like an angel. This is amazing. This is the superiority and the tafawuq of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That he also got hungry, he also got tired, he also suffered from health problems from time to time. But he still communicated the message flawlessly. That's what's amazing, right? So Allah Ta'ala says, okay, fine, you're asking for an angel. Even if we sent an angel, in order for you to understand it, he would have had to be like the humanest angel possible, right? This is, by the way, a really good project. Any of our brothers and sisters, like madrasa graduates, you want to make a name for yourself in ilm and be like, like make it on the circuit or whatever. Here, I'm giving you a free idea. Go through the Quran and see what all the rational arguments Allah makes in the Quran. So this is one of the rational arguments. Ba'ithun bila mashaqqa, that Allah Ta'ala, the mushrikeen of Quraysh, they would do stuff like they would take a brittle bone that's of an animal that's been long dead, and the bone's been baked and weakened in the heat of the Arabian sun, and they would pick up that brittle bone and say, قَالَ مَنْ يُحْيِي الْعِظَامَ وَهِيَ رَمِيمٌ, that person would crush the bone into dust in their hands and say, who's going to bring this back to life? Allah Ta'ala, what is his answer? I'm Allah, so you have to listen. No. Although that's also correct, that there's so much correctness in that, it's overwhelming. But what did he do? He humored the insan. What did he say? He says, قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ خَلْقٍ عَلِيمٌ. That say to that person who crushed that bone, that the one who brought it to life in the first place, he's the one who's going to bring it again. Meaning what? The fact that you're alive in the first place, it means it's possible to make it come to life. Allah Ta'ala says in another place, وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ. It's actually easier for him. What's easier? To design the original Gucci bag or to make the knockoff? The original design was difficult. Once it's made, then there's like 1,000 sweatshops in China that are going to make the knockoff, mashallah. Right? وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ. Why are you wondering if this is possible or not? You see the blueprint of it, proof of concept walking in front of you. In fact, the second creation should, by rational standards, it actually should be easier. If anything, it should be easier. Allah Ta'ala is ba'ithun bila mashaqqa. I mean, literally, this age we live in is it's an interesting age. Why? Because you literally know, like, the DNA has, literally has to the molecular level, to the atomic level, has the blueprint of every single protein that you're made out of, and how all of your organs are going to be put together, etc., etc. You know to a T how easy it is to clone a human being. So this is not something that a person should wonder about. Khair, this is our Aqidah. Allah Ta'ala will give life to everybody again one day. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala give all of us so much tawfiq to believe the sacred Aqidah. I am told that the time is 9, and so we'll start again 10 o'clock tomorrow. Again, make mujahada, come. It's only one weekend. You'll keep the knowledge afterward forever. Then you go and teach the Tahawiyyah. Make a big name for yourself. People, crowds of adoring people in Masjid will say that this sister Fulana or brother Fulana is the one that saved my Iman, and they'll, you know, be your Twitter follower and Facebook follower and YouTube page, and they'll adulate you and shower you with praise and all of this other stuff, right? Learn it, teach it even better than I have. I'm nothing except for the fraud that I'm describing. Otherwise, this is the work of our elders and the work of our mashayikh and the work of the awliya of Allah Ta'ala. There's so much barakah in these things that it makes a person's iman live. So come make mujahada for this weekend. Inshallah, you'll eat from the benefit of it in this world and the hereafter as well. Allah Ta'ala gives so much tawfiq to all of us. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala rasulihi Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.